From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast, episode number 414. Andrew with you once again. I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. My co-host is Derek. You know him in the forum as D43, and he is D4384 on Twitter.
I'm happy to be here. However, I have bad news, Andrew.
What's that?
I received my PC copy of NBA Live 2004, and it has a crack on the disc. A disc-only version that I bought, so I knew what I was getting into, but they said that it was in great condition. And the way it came packaged was in this flimsy, cardboard, and it wasn't protected by anything. It wasn't in a little plastic case. It wasn't in its own little CD case. It was just hanging out loose in this little cardboard casing. And as you know, there's two discs that come with NBA Live 2004. There's disc 1, disc 2, and disc 1 has a crack in it. So I'm not too happy about that.
Not at all. Is that an eBay purchase, that one?
That's actually straight off of Amazon.
Ah, okay. Like a secondhand copy.
It is, but if you're going to send something through the mail, like a disc, you got to put it in something. You got to put it in a plastic case, something to protect it. But there was nothing protecting this at all.
Yeah, that's just not good shipping methods, quite frankly. Funnily enough, the copy of NBA Live 96 that I bought for you, that will be heading your way very soon, came in a very similar fashion. It was just really kind of popped in there in a little thin plastic sleeve, not even a plastic case, not even one of those thin jewel cases, just kind of like a plastic sleeve. And I thought, okay, has this been damaged in the post? So I popped it in, and no, it installed, and it's playing fine. So you will have a working copy of that at least coming. But I was also looking at some other games that I got for bargain prices at various points over the years, and I noticed a few that you might like in your collection, so I'll be chucking those in the box as well. I do actually have a copy of Live 2004 if you want me to put that in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an extra, that would be amazing, because then at least I know that you're going to put it in something. I didn't even get the courtesy of a plastic sleeve. Like I said, it was just loose and ruined. So, I mean, that stinks too, because when I paid for it, it wasn't only $5 or anything. I actually had to pay probably around 20 to 25 for the game plus the shipping and whatnot. So, huge bummer. On the positive side of things, I did actually hook up the PlayStation 5 last night. Bought a couple extra controllers for, if my brothers and I all want to, get on the same team or play against each other or whatnot. And I will be downloading MJ Wizards roster tonight. So I am excited about that.
I was going to say, you're going to have to get onto MJ Wizards roster with your brothers and play with some teams that have been fixed with their ratings and missing players and whatnot. And look at that Charles Barkley that he made. Look at that Reggie Miller.
Very good for the creative player feature in that game, because they really haven't made many improvements to the creative player feature over the last couple of years. I think that the jobs that were done on those were admirable. I love the creations of J.R. Smith and whatnot that he did and that he posted in that thread, because that J.R. Smith could pass for an in-game, real cyberface. It's that good.
It really was impressive, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to download the roster and then go into a MyNBA. And of course, people were talking about 2K22. Go into a MyNBA, download the already pre-made courts for teams like the 66, 67, 76ers, the 92, 93 Suns. Rename the teams if they need to be renamed, if we're using some of the classic teams that he added, and then maybe jumping into a MyNBA, at least at the bare minimum with my brother Nick. So it should be a lot of fun.
But speaking of fun, Derek, we've been connecting on Parsec a lot lately, as we often do, and we connected on Live 10, which that's something we haven't done for a while. We dusted that off. Always fun to revisit that game, but it has been a while, and too long, in fact, and we went back to our fantasy teams mode, retro teams.
So yeah, I was actually looking on YouTube and watching some of the games that we had played, in the past on NBA Live 10 with makeshift classic teams, and watching our matchup with the 2005 Bulls and the 2005 Supersonics, etc. And the games looked so fun, and it was bringing back some memories of how much fun we had with it last year. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to reach out to Andrew. Let's get a game together. Playing NBA Live 10 and revisit that. So we used the 0304 Celtics. I was the 0304 Celtics, and you were the 0304 Heat. And while we were both missing a couple key players. I was missing Walter McCarty, and you were missing Eddie Jones and whatnot. It was still a fun, loose experience, and that's what's fun about NBA Live 10. It's easy to jump into, and it's easy to just have, a really good time with. And I thought you played incredibly well, especially with Lamar Odom. You killed me with him just like you did on NBA Live 2001. Wade with his step back fadeaways and his mid range game and attacking the rim. You did really well with that. You ended up pulling out the win. I tried to come back there with Paul Pierce, and he did hit a couple clutch threes in the fourth quarter. But just a really fun, loose experience. And it's nice that people can kind of enjoy that experience with us, when I make that video and you upload it to the NLSC YouTube.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you reached out and said, hey, let's play some Live 10, because it's overdue. It's been a while, and we have a long list of makeshift classic teams that we can create in Fantasy Teams mode. So I was really glad to do that again. Happy to pick up the win, obviously, but I was very concerned about Paul Pierce down the stretch. Now, if you had Walter McCarty, I think you would have won, because Walter McCarty killed me in Live 2001.
I think it hurt me having Rafe LaFrance. I had to, because we were limited with the amount of players that we had, I had to put Rafe LaFrance at like power forward and Mark Blount at center. And I was like doubling up centers at power forward and center, and I wasn't able to stretch the floor like I would have been able to with Walter McCarty. And that version of Rafe LaFrance in that game is basically like retired Rafe LaFrance. I'm actually surprised his face is in the game. I think it's because he wasn't technically retired and he was like technically a free agent, but he wasn't signed.
No, I think 2009 was his last year, so I think he's left over from that. Ricky Davis that was his last year, because he played that final year with the Clippers in 2010, so that's why he's in there. But again, he's at the end of his career, so a lot of players kind of at the end of the career. And conversely, I'm supposed to have young Dwayne Wade on the 2004 Heat, rookie Wade, but I've got prime Wade, so he was able to do some damage with him.
You also had the great Odom, too.
Oh, of course.
Like a really good version of Odom. That's the championship Lakers Odom. But at the same time, I can't make any excuses because I still had some pieces. I still had Paul Pierce and Ricky Davis for supposedly the end of his career. Ricky Davis performed admirably, had some nice dunks, nice step back fadeaway, etc. The people that really failed me were Chucky Atkins and Marcus Spanks, who gave me nothing on offense or defense. They couldn't hit a damn shot. And I think that was probably the biggest difference maker, not having Walter McCarty and then Chucky Atkins and Marcus Banks just stinking it up.
Well, Rafer Alston with the clutch and one down the stretch, for me.
That was huge. Good animation that led into that, too, and the commentary around it was fantastic. I did want to say, too, on the now that we're talking about, some of the newer NBA Lives, I say newer for NBA Live 10 because it is newer than, say, NBA Live 2004. Yeah. But I connected with Brent Lane on through Parsec on NBA Live 15, and he was the Hawks and I was the Trailblazers. And I got to tell you something. I didn't have a lot of fun with NBA Live 15 against the computer. Like I when I was playing that when it first came out, I was pretty blah about it. Still preferred NBA 2K15, etc. But when you play NBA Live 15 head to head against somebody, it's just an entirely different experience. And we had such a blast. I wish I could show you the conversation that we had on Discord during the game and after the game about the experience. And that game, the best thing about it and what makes it more fun for me right now to pick up than NBA Live 19 is it feels like there's like no canned animations in that game. Like you feel like you really have control over the action. I see what they were trying to do with that title. They were trying to give the user as much control as possible and not put them always in these canned animations. So it was a very realistic feeling game that I played against Brent, and he played incredibly well with Teague and Korver and Horford and whatnot. Horford had 14 points and 14 rebounds. We were both, getting out on the break and, either throwing alley-oops or finding the open man and finishing realistically. Players coming off screens and hitting threes, and the shooting feels good in that game overall. Both of us making post moves, me, doing a lot of damage down there with Chris Kaman and whatnot. But what a breath of fresh air it was to play NBA Live 15, even over playing NBA 2K22. And you might think that's crazy, but I want you to think about the lack of control that you sometimes have with NBA 2K22, with all the suction issues, with all the, the predetermined happenings on the court and all the canned animations. It was definitely a breath of fresh air. And he actually said the same thing. Brent was like, what a breath of fresh air to play this game and like he said, it felt a lot more realistic to him.
Well, I had a pretty good time with Live 15 back in the day, playing mostly Ultimate Team, so against the CPU. But I do think that's one of those games that it works even better head-to-head because it does have some AI issues. So take that out of the equation, just have two players who know what they're doing, going head-to-head, and it's a lot of fun. I know what you mean about it feeling a bit more organic as well. I love the steals in that game. The steals felt very good, especially compared to the press steal to foul that we've seen in both Live and 2K in subsequent years. One thing I do remember from Live 15, though, is getting a lot of 4-point plays with J.R. Smith in Ultimate Team.
Yeah, so there were no 4-point plays in the game that we played, but as far as like poke steals and the way steals feel in general, they feel awesome in Live 15 as far as like jumping into the passing lanes and intercepting passes. But also just like poke steals. I got one with Lillard as he was dribbling up the court. I timed it right and I did a poke steal. Didn't feel canned at all. And then went down and threw it down on the other end. I think that NBA Live 15 and 2K14 both have very strong overall defensive mechanics that I enjoy. That was the next game that we actually revisited. We played on NBA 2K14 Xbox One using Parsec, and that experience was not as realistic. There's actually quite a bit more skating in NBA 2K14 than Live 15 and a little bit more canned animations and whatnot, but we still had a really good time on that. But no, I can definitely, like I've said so many times on the podcast, good defensive mechanics, good feeling, organic defensive mechanics are vital for enjoying a game, playing a game on the defensive end and playing a game in general for basketball video games. And I think that NBA Live 15 did a good job with that.
No, they really are. The importance of having that, being able to play at both ends. Because you go back to the early days of basketball gaming, sometimes it wasn't really viable to make defensive plays outside of, unless you got the steal or unless you got the block. And even then, it was difficult to do. And I remember talking about it with Josh and Dave when we brought them on the show from Nemo Gamer, Basketball Classics, of course. And we were talking about the hallmarks of bad video game design, bad basketball video game design. And one of the things we pointed out and agreed on was bad games, you can't play defense.
100%. That's how we felt on 2K18. Remember?
Yep.
We felt like you can't really play defense on it because of the blow-bys and because of all the canned animations. I think that was one of the problems actually on NBA 2K13, the fact that you couldn't block dunks, right? 2K13 was a very strong basketball game, but its biggest weakness was actually trying to play defense. That's why on NBA 2K13 you can use a guy like Alonzo G and average 50 points per game pretty easily because they have the it's pretty easy to blow by your defender on the perimeter, and then once you're downhill towards the hoop and you push the shoot button, the chances of you dunking on them or them automatically making you adjust your shot to make it a good shot at the rim, the chances of those things happening are so high that it makes it frustrating to play defense sometimes on 2K13. Again, they were able to get away with it because I think NBA 2K13 overall as a basketball game, as far as the overall feel, I think it's a plus. Like, it's good. But that was definitely a frustrating aspect of 2K13.
Once you get up for the dunks, unless you're missing a dunk with a player, yeah, you're getting that to go in, which I put to very effective use in my career back then in 2K13. First year I got into that mode, of course. The other thing with 2K13 was the offensive exploit with signature skills, specifically the Acrobat signature skill, where you could double tap shoot on the perimeter and do an adjusted kind of running shot and make a three-pointer every single time when you did that. I made 23s in a game just doing that. And it's not very fun. I don't like to do it, but I just wanted to test it out once just to see how that exploit worked, and effectively, that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's how I kind of felt too with NBA Live 06, because even though it was a very strong release, that's how I felt with the scoring freestyle superstar ability, where your player, you use it and your player just shoots this kind of awkward looking shot, and it has such a high chance of going in, it almost feels cheating.
Oh, the outside scorer freestyle superstars moveset actually, ironically, was even more effective in the paint, because outside scorers also had basically was kind of like your wing play, your athletic wing was really the kind of thing they were going for with outside scorer, and you could do all kinds of up and under layups and behind the back moves before the layup, and they would go in 90% of the time. In fact, you knew when the comeback logic was kicking in because you couldn't do it against the CPU. Normally you could spam that all day and score 100 points with whoever, Ben Gordon, for example, just to put it out there. But when the comeback logic was kicking in, suddenly all those guaranteed baskets would start missing. So you knew when the comeback logic was starting to really get aggressive with you. But yes, that was very OP, very cheesy. Great move that they made in 06 was the ability to switch Freestyle Superstars movesets, but also to disable them completely. So you could still play a game that was very similar to Live 2005, but with a few enhancements.
NBA Live 06, the beginning of builds. Damn you, NBA Live.
Yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
You really think of it. But no, seriously. So I connected with 2K on 2K14 with Brent as well. And like I said, what a unbelievable thing to be able to connect on Parsec, play any Xbox One game with somebody, huh? We're using the Xbox One console companion in combination with Parsec, and it's just working beautifully. And so people are connecting with me, and we're playing, games like NBA Live 15 and 2K14, etc. But we connected on there, and he was using the Lakers, and I was using the Thunder. It was kind of a duel between Kobe and Kevin Durant, and I think they both put up roughly 27, 28 points. But he was down by one with 10 seconds left. And he had Kobe in the post, and I went over to double him, and he kicked it out to Xavier Henry and missed a three. And lesson learned, we both talked about it in the chat. I know Kobe's double team there, but you got to take the shot with Kobe.
Oh, yeah.
He should have faded over the opposite shoulder. So he ended up losing that game by one. But we actually had a really fun experience on that. We were both a little bit rusty, and going from NBA Live 15 to NBA 2K14 is quite the adjustment.
Oh yeah,
let's be honest.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, very different feel.
Very different feel. They play almost entirely different. But we ended up having a really good second half experience on that game, and I hope to connect with him again and others on more Xbox One games.
I'm envious of that because I've been enjoying 2K14 recently, as we talked about last week with MyCAREER, but also with some other modes as well. The 5v5 modes. Well, MyCAREER is 5v5, but you know what I mean, non-player lock. And we tried to connect on that. Unfortunately, my connection just didn't want to play along. That's Australian internet. But how good is on Fire Edition over Parsec? I mean, we played that so much. That's another one we need to get back into.
Yeah, we have to play that soon, actually. We should play it either this weekend or next week and, post some highlights and whatnot. Yeah, I don't understand that with you not having a great experience on a game like NBA 2K14, Xbox One using Parsec, because people like Brent and others like Sticky Fingers and whatnot have connected with me and the Live King on Xbox One games with that exact same setup that I'm trying to connect with you on. And they've had an amazing experience. I even had a user say they had no lag. So I think it comes down to your internet.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just doesn't always work the way that we want it to. But I still have hope. I think we might be able to figure something out in the settings. Maybe the Apple get some upgrades that help your situation. Who knows? But I still have hope.
Well, who knows? They might improve Australian internet at some point in the next 10 years. But no, we should keep trying. They're constantly updating Parsec. It is such a tremendous app. It's gotten a lot better since we started. And of course, I've upgraded to Windows 10, long overdue as well, last year. And that's facilitated me hosting sometimes, obviously, but also it's given me better performance all around. Hosted a game of Live 2003 with you, Live 2003 PC.
Yeah, we were kicking the computer's butt on Rookie there. But I'll tell you something. You put that game on All-Star, and they don't miss.
They're not messing around. They're not messing around.
And you want to talk about brick wall defense? NBA Live 2003 might be the king of brick wall defense. You can cross over, you can try to do a first step, and they are brick walling you, whichever direction you try to go in. The only reason you were able to get a couple baskets there with Jordan is because you were flailing on your stick. And crossing over a couple times and then doing a spin move, completely unnatural looking, but it worked.
Cheesy.
And you were getting into the seams. Yeah, you were basically cheesing the buttons. Let's put it that way. And it was working out. But man, that game is so fun and loose on Rookie and Starter. But when you bump that up to All-Star, it's like, what is happening here? You can't even move. And I want to bring this up because VF Baller, who's a friend of the show, he really appreciates our content. We appreciate him. He made a post. Somebody was talking to him about Madden. They were saying, what difficulty do you play on Madden? And his response was, I will play all Madden, but when you play all Madden, it's absolutely unrealistic. Like, and he used an example of a bad defensive team. He's like, it makes a bad defensive team look like an elite defensive team, and that's not realistic, right? So I know that there's a lot of pride around playing on the hardest level. My brother and I are like that. We're like, oh, we got to play on Hall of Fame, or oh, we got to play on Superstar and whatnot. But I implore our listeners to play on the level that you have the most fun on. And if you're looking for a realistic experience, play on the level that gives you the most realistic experience. Don't worry about, being stubborn and saying, well, I have to beat it on the hardest level. I have to play it on the hardest level.
No, that's tremendous advice, because I do think a lot of people get, over the years, very elitist about that. Like, oh, you're just playing on rookie or starter? Well, if that's your skill level, if that's what you enjoy, fair enough. Now, if you're beating up on the CPU on rookie and calling yourself the best player in the world, okay, pump the brakes on that one. But I absolutely agree. And as you said, if realism is what you're after, sometimes it's better to go maybe a level down from the top and just make some slider adjustments.
Right. The gentleman on Twitter named Dion, he was like, well, what sliders do you use? He was like, what sliders do you use for your gameplay and all that stuff? And I said, my sliders might not be great for you. Here's what I use, and here's what I put the game speed on. But I implore you to basically use a slider set and choose a base difficulty that gives you the most enjoyment out of the game. Period. That is it, right? People want to make these adjustments or get all of these sim stats and all of that stuff, and they want it to look a certain way, etc. But I just want people to do what is going to be the most fun for them. And if that means playing it on All-Star, if that means playing it on Starter, if that means playing it on Hall of Fame, if that's the best experience for you, do it. But I did appreciate VF Baller for that, and it shows why we have a kind of a connection with VF Baller, right? He looks at these games kind of like we do. I appreciated that interaction, because he's like, I can play it on All Madden. I can beat it on All Madden. But I don't play All Madden because it's unrealistic and it's not fun. So play the way you want.
I think it's one of those things, another stigma that needs to be broken down within sports gaming, especially, that again, it's supposed to be about fun, and that whole elitist attitude that's made the online scene very toxic. Let's not bring that into the offline scene as well, people.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing, too, is, whenever we connect on games on Parsec, and whenever I connect with other people, normally what I do is I keep it either on the default difficulty or I'll raise it one level up. Why? Because if there is any hint of input lag, I want somebody to be able to have that leeway, right?
And it works. It works so much better doing that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's me connecting with somebody or them connecting with me. And I think that's worked out really well for us. I think it's made that our NBA Live 10 games incredibly memorable, more memorable than it would have been if we had played it on the hardest level. I think that it made me and Brent Lane's game, even though he didn't really have any lag, on NBA Live 15, we played it on the default level. It made that game incredibly fun and very realistic as well. But when you and I tried to play NBA Live 2003 on All-Star, and that brick wall defense combined with you hosting, so me having a few lag spikes in there, it just wasn't going to work. And I could tell that even you, who has no lag as the host, you couldn't even do anything sometimes, because that brick wall defense is absolutely ridiculous.
Plus, that was the year they brought in the take charge button, which the CPU takes advantage of that as well. And you could see them getting a lot of cheap charging calls, which really went against us more often than them, funnily enough, which is, again, where some of that challenge comes from the CPU, is that it's not playing fair. So are you going to have fun and a fair challenge, or are you just going to have the bragging rights, that pride, as you said, and beat the game on the toughest level? If that's fun for you, by all means do it. But if not, don't be afraid. Don't care about what other people think about turning it down and to a more acceptable, fun level of difficulty or gameplay settings or whatever. To your point about NBA Live 10, I mean, we're going head-to-head, so even when we're playing on the easier difficulty level, I still have to contend with your abilities as a gamer, so on all the experience you have with playing basketball games. So you still have to contend with the difficulty there. It may not be as challenging against the CPU, but with you being able to hit as many shots as I can on that easier level, that's where the challenge comes in. But look how well it worked out for our Live 10 tournament and how much fun people had with that.
Yeah, that worked out perfect. Oh, I wanted to say too about NBA Jam on Fire Edition. So we played on Rookie for the first round of the NBA Jam on Fire Edition tournament. And I actually think Rookie is the best level for head to head. We upped it to medium for the semifinals, and that's worked out. But on Rookie, you have to do the most as a user, right? Because you don't have the computer bailing you out as often as on the higher levels on that game. So, like, for example, when I was watching 707 series, he is incredibly skilled at the game. It's not his fault that this was happening, but he didn't even have to use David Robinson on defense. The computer could make all the difference in the world on defense because off the ball, the computer is just constantly pushing the players and getting blocks and all of that stuff. So basically what happens is it takes control away from the user. But if he was on Rookie, he'd be the one who'd be having to switch to David Robinson and do the pushing and make up for David Robinson not going for the block. He'd have to switch to David Robinson and go for the block. So I actually think that for true skill gap and true competition on a game like NBA Jam on Fire Edition, and for total control, I actually think head-to-head is best on Rookie.
Interesting. And it certainly makes a lot of sense. But speaking of the On Fire Edition tournament, you've been playing some games of that and had a bit of a rough game one.
Heartbreaking loss for me. I'm up 2-1 in the series. I won games. I bounced back and won games 2 and 3. It's the best of 7, so I'm up 2-1. But in game 1, just such a back and forth. Tecmo Bowl is a very skilled player at NBA Jam on Fire Edition. He's very good offensively and defensively, so I knew I had my hands full coming into the series. Back and forth all through game 1. I was up by 1 with roughly 10 seconds left. And I have the ball, and I'm holding the ball in the backcourt with Bill Walton. And instead of staying in the backcourt with Bill Walton and letting the time run out, like zigzagging in the backcourt, I don't know. I had a brain fart, not sure what it was. I ran into the front court, and he ended up stealing the ball from me and hitting a last-second buzzer beater game winner with Magic Johnson. And it was a layup. And so that was tragic on my part. Not tragic Johnson, because he got the game winner, but it's tragic on my part. And it's funny how how into this Tecmo Bowl gets, because we had to take like a break, like a 5-minute break after game 1, because he said he needed his heart rate to go down.
I love that.
Yeah, that's how competitive these games get. I did bounce back, and we had 2 really close games in games 2 and 3, and I ended up winning those. But it's tough to contend with Magic Johnson and Kobe Bryant because in the game, they can both shoot incredibly well. So he has 2 shooting threats, and both have a big steal. So they're both very good at picking my pocket or knocking me over and getting the ball and whatnot. So it's been a really good series, and I think it could go the distance. He's that good of a player as well. So we'll see what happens. But Stildo 33 is waiting in the finals. And still feeling good about his epic 7-game series that he won. I just think it's been a great tournament, and I can't wait for our March Madness tournament.
Absolutely. And, as heartbreaking as that was, a great entry in the top 10 this week.
Yeah, and speaking of the top 10, I thought it was another really strong week, and we had a few new people in there this week. I am Brent Lane with an NBA Live 15 highlight, block off a block on a layup, and then an alley-oop to Al Horford. And we had a great highlight as well from NBA 2K22 from LOV on Twitter at @SweetJones_OTF, who's actually Miles Bridges' cousin.
Wow.
Which I thought.
I did not know that. Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
Really cool. Yeah. Who plays for the Hornets. And the highlight, of course, from NBA 2K22 was of Miles Bridges. And that highlight, I actually put to, because it had no commentary with it, I smoothed it out. And it's a Miles Bridges dunk. But I put the Eric Collins commentary, the official Charlotte Hornets announcer, to it. And man, did that come out exciting. It's the perfect audio for that dunk, and he was really appreciative of that. So thank you for the submission and whatnot. I think it looked really good in the top 10. But yeah, a good variety of games again. A really good number 1 play from Winner 77 from the NLSC, and you had your game winner with Jamal Crawford there with audio you put in, and I thought that came out great. I think that was number 5. I thought it was a really good top 10 this week.
It's always a great time. Always pumps you up to play. And Yeah, I'm really enjoying putting that audio as well. You've got me into that habit now of putting that audio, trying to find a great clip and putting that to when it hasn't been captured with the commentary and the audio. Love seeing that variety. Love seeing some of the familiar faces, the familiar names in the top 10, but also we're getting a lot of new people jumping on all the time as well. So great submissions every week.
King J Mace was in there again, and he's doing a lot for the basketball gaming community right now, connecting with people on Parsec and using that Elite Street League mod. So definitely appreciative of him. He's doing a lot of unique things with his content on YouTube, so I implore people to check that out. I think that's the third time I've used implore on this podcast. I've never used it before. That's
Word of the
word
week.
of the day.
Word of the week, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, check out King J Mace's channel. He's bringing like Stretch Monroe back and putting him on the court against, regular NBA teams or street ball legends and whatnot. And he's like doing WNBA videos as well, putting the WNBA players on the street and playing NBA players, etc. He's doing a lot of unique content, and his commentary is very good on his content, and people seem to really connect with him. So make sure to check out King J Mace's channel. I believe he had the number 3 or 4 highlight this week with an under the legs dunk on blacktop on NBA 2K22.
Definitely check out what he's doing, and yeah, I love to see that creativity in modding. That's always great to see, and setting up those fun scenarios, whether it's minimalist modding or whether it's in depth like he's doing. It's always just makes such great stuff to watch and to play with. So definitely check it out and keep those submissions coming for the top 10. I do have a dunk from my MyCAREER that might make it into a future countdown. Added some audio that I thought fit very well, but that dunk felt very good to do, Derek, in the game.
You're getting really into the audio.
I am.
Into adding the audio, and I think that's really cool. And I would love to see more people do that. People that take these highlights and they don't have audio because of the limitations of the console. Before sending them over, maybe use an editing program and put some audio over it,
or take out terrible audio like Live 19. Get rid of Jay Williams.
Right, exactly. Jay Williams is the worst. He might be the worst. Actually, Doris Burke is pretty annoying now, too. I think Doris Burke and Jay Williams might be my worst hated right now to listen to in basketball video games. And I really hope Jay Williams doesn't come back on the next NBA Live if they return, because they can do better than that. And that was one cool thing about NBA Live 15 was Mike Breen and Jeff Van Gundy. And sure, Jeff Van Gundy can be a little over the top sometimes, but it's really exciting listening to them, and it sounds like a real broadcast. You know what I mean? So I really love the commentary and the presentation in NBA Live 15.
I mean, it's the A team for NBA on ESPN and NBA on ABC, so it should be them.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think 2K has done a good job overall, even though I do find the commentary pretty annoying at times. They've done a good job of retaining Harlan. You know what I mean? Retaining Harlan and retaining Burke, and retaining David Aldridge on the sidelines, and all of these people that they use. The Steve Smiths and the Brent Barrys and all of that stuff in that commentary. They've done a good job of basically keeping the big names in the commentary.
Poor David Aldridge. Everybody skips him.
They do, and so do I.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. I skip him every time.
Thanks, DA. So as we move towards the mailbag segment this week, Derek, there was a tweet that you brought to my attention that led to this week's mailbag prompt. It's from Retrofaith at Retrofaith1 on Twitter. She's a gaming journalist and a retro game shop owner, and put out a tweet that said, "What happened to video games? I have never seen so much excitement for 10-year-old games getting re-released again. I remember when game announcements were always something new, something fresh. I feel sad that gamers' expectations are so low these days. Maybe I am just old." And I think you and I can really relate to that.
I love the tweet. Absolutely loved it, because it definitely highlights, I think, a problem in video gaming in general, not just basketball video games, but video gaming in general, where there's definitely a lack of excitement for new releases and new content. A lot of MMORPGs and RPGs are kind of like running together now. They're lacking, they're lacking deep stories or relatable characters. They're lacking uniqueness. There a lot of the mechanics kind of just like run in together. Same thing with a lot of new adventure games and whatnot, and sports games. We don't have as many options as we used to. People feel like the gameplay on games like Madden and games like NBA 2K has kind of gotten old and stale, and they're just kind of expecting quote unquote roster updates every year. So I think that prompted me to say, hey, let's ask the community, do you still get as excited as you used to about basketball video game releases? And what was the last game that you were truly excited about to be released? And we got a lot of responses to this.
We did. It was fantastic. But my quick thoughts on that matter, I think it speaks volumes that the games that people are more excited about, re-releases and remakes, and they're all from a time before microtransactions really took off. And look, I know that's beating a dead horse, and people know recurrent revenue mechanics are the bane of modern gaming. We know that, we've said that so many times before. But this is further proof, is that it's going back to these concepts when the main aim of games was to be creative and to create art and to create a fun experience on the sticks or the keyboard and mouse, whatever game, whatever genre it is, and whatever controller, whatever method of control you're using. But I think that really does speak to how games used to be about the fun. And certainly it was always a business, and microtransactions aren't that new. They've been around for probably about 10 years now, really, or longer. And DLC and things like that, and expansion packs and pre-order bonuses.
But they were dominating. Right, but they weren't dominating
Correct.
The space.
Exactly.
They were there like we talked about, NBA 2K17. Sure, there was the virtual currency, right? There was like still that. There were still some little gambling mechanics in there, but it wasn't dominating the game, and it wasn't dominating the advertising, and there wasn't all of this stuff hidden behind paywalls.
It's kicked into overdrive, absolutely. That is the difference. And by bringing those games back, of course, you have the problem of then adding recurrent revenue mechanics to these old games, these remakes of these classics. But once again, it just speaks volumes of how the philosophy of game design has changed over the past 10 years or so. And yeah, we don't have that excitement that we had. Although some people still do, which I kind of envy, actually. But to that point, you did put out that prompt. You still get excited as you used to about basketball video game releases. What release are you most excited about? So with that in mind, let's open up the mailbag.
To the mailman, the pump fake. What an unbelievable dunk!
And as you said, Derek, a lot of great responses this week. I think this really resonated with people.
Yeah, well, I used an example in there of how my brother, he was super excited for NBA 2K13 to be released. So he waited in line at a midnight release to get the game, and he waited for quite a while. I just remember our excitement the first time we popped in NBA 2K13, NBA 2K12, NBA 2K11, NBA 2K10, 2K8. Live 06. I remember the excitement of us getting our, between all the commercials that we saw leading up to it, like, oh my God, we got to get that game, to the trip to the store to go get it, how excited we were on that trip. Then to finally get our hands on it and put it in the console or put it in the PC, etc. It was a super exciting time. So that's, the question definitely resonated with a lot of the community. So I know that you have all those responses in front of you.
And I do wonder sometimes, just quickly before we get to the first response, that's kind of the same time that I look back at maybe the peak or the final days of the peak of my excitement. And I do wonder, that was the final years of my 20s. And I wonder if being a jaded 30-something has got something to do with that. I know a lot of it has to do with the gaming industry itself, but it kind of gets to that point where that excitement, that child-at-heart excitement, isn't always there these days.
It's possible. It's possible that could have something to do with it. I do think that we had all different ages in the response.
True.
In the response. And that everybody but maybe one or two people were all feeling the same. That they don't get as excited about the games anymore. That, there's only one game and they feel like, it's more like a roster update every year. I think that a lot of people, and we've seen the negative reaction towards the recent 2Ks and whatnot from a lot of people. And what it is, I think, and you've read Reddit threads about this, etc., is I think that a lot of people just feel like the game is too microtransaction focused, and at the same time that the gameplay has gotten kind of stale.
That definitely seems to be a recurring theme with the responses. And speaking of which, let's get right to them. And this comes from Midwest King _100 on Twitter. For me, it was 2K11. When I heard that they reached an agreement to acquire the license to play as Michael Jordan, virtually made me want to buy the game day one. Today I don't get as excited as I used to because I feel like they don't show as much effort like they used to in regards to authenticity of how a basketball video game is supposed to play like. Also, the lack of attention to classic teams, or at least to add new teams, is alarming. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember with 2K11, I was still trying to get that. I was still trying to make that transition from live to 2K at that time. Still sticking with live PC and updating live 06 PC. 2K, of course, didn't have the right stick dribbling yet. It still didn't feel very accessible to me, as I've talked about on so many occasions before. But 2K11, when I saw that and I saw Michael Jordan was going to be in the game like that, and the Jordan Challenge, that certainly piqued my interest and really got me to pay more attention to 2K when I was covering it for the site, Derek, but at the same time, I was still very much a live gamer at heart, but that really did turn my head.
Those are all great points. I think we can agree with every single point that he made, especially the lack of attention to detail, as far as basketball goes. And I think also what he means is just like the focus on NBA basketball and the players and teams in general. Like, for example, if Charles Barkley or Reggie Miller signed on with 2K, you would be like, oh, that's cool. We're going to get Charles Barkley and Reggie Miller. But you know that the gameplay in between the lines is probably not going to satisfy you, especially if it's similar to what was in NBA 2K22 if you don't enjoy that title, right? It's still going to be that stale gameplay. So it's not something that's going to be fresh to accompany Charles Barkley and Reggie Miller signing on with the game. So I definitely feel like instead of focusing on true simulation basketball, 5-on-5 between the lines gameplay, it's turned into kind of a canimation fest. And at the same time, it's the gameplay is now so tailored to that locked on player experience, to that MyCAREER Park / experience, that's why, it's really hard to get excited for these new 2K titles.
The great thing about NBA 2K22 is that it technically does still cater to everybody. You've still got My NBA or My League in current gen, prior gen, whatever. And you've got all the online modes, you've got a lot of offline modes, you've got My Team, so you can find something to play if you can get into the gameplay as of 2K22. But if you look at the promotion of it and the hype, and what they're also talking about on Twitter and their other socials post-release, you can see what they're focused on, and that doesn't appeal to a lot of old heads, I suppose, like us, but also anybody who doesn't really like Park, absolutely.
Yeah, and remember all the exciting advertising that was taking place before 2K11 came out?
Oh, yeah.
We were getting commercials constantly for it. It was such a huge deal. We were seeing it talked about in magazines. It was on the internet, all of that stuff. It was just so much hype. And they did such a good job of hyping that up. And I talked about that, about the old NBA Live releases, and it's what makes me so angry with EA Sports over the last few years that they actually did have releases. They did such a poor job overall of marketing some of their recent releases. If you go back and you look at the early 2000s and mid 2000s, man, there were commercials constantly for those games, pumping you up, putting NBA Live in your brain and people in your house's brain, all of that stuff. It was basically like constant advertising saying, you got to get this game. This is the things we're adding to the game, putting the athletes like Kevin Garnett and Tim Duncan out there for you to get excited about it. I just don't see it as much today. I just don't see the strong advertising like we used to have.
And those commercials, like you said, you've got the NBA players playing the games. You've got all kinds of NBA footage. The OMG trailer has not been surpassed by anything that's come in the years past. I mean, Momentous trailers are always nice, but I think that OMG trailer, as far as that punch, and of course that was all NBA based. So that is what sells the games ultimately, the NBA. We've said that before, and it remains as true today as it always has been. So those commercials were fantastic. We don't see that as much. We don't see as much hype for the NBA post-release. It's there, but not to the same extent as it used to be.
Right, and he brought up authentic, NBA. So we talked about how they've really rushed the classic teams, right? Spreadsheet copy and paste, copied signatures over, etc. And I think that's part of the problem, is a lot of people want to go in there and use these players and for them to be well made and to play similar to their real life counterpart on the floor. And I think that sometimes they do okay with that with the current teams. Sometimes they still miss on that as well. But they certainly miss on that part today with the classic content, with the all-time teams, with the classic teams, etc. It's rushed, it's low priority, and that's incredibly easy to see.
Question for you before we move on to the next response. If they were to add Reggie Miller in 2K23, whose copy and paste ratings and animations do you think he'd have?
That's funny. His Reggie Miller's shot is incredibly unique. I feel like they would botch it right out of the gate. They may have to give him his own special release, so they'd have to like create one. I don't know if they'd want to bring him into studio to do motion capture, etc., or if he'd be willing to do that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that they would make him, I don't know, maybe like a Kyle Korver type.
He's just got Kyle Korver or Ray Allen, maybe.
Yeah, maybe like close to Ray, a mixture between like Ray Allen and Kyle Korver. And would it surprise you to like pop in NBA 2K23, boot up, look at Reggie Miller's tendencies and then Ray Allen's tendencies and see that they're almost identical?
Not at all.
They probably wouldn't, or identical, period. But no, I'm not sure. Like the same thing with Charles Barkley. Like Charles Barkley is a very unique player. I wouldn't be surprised if they did a lot of copy and paste with, like, I don't know, maybe like a guy like Zion Williamson, even though Zion Williamson and Barkley actually don't play alike, to be completely honest with you. But, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't trust the people at 2K to know what they're doing as far as making the classic teams accurate. I don't think they have the right minds on that project, to be honest with you.
It certainly leaves a lot to be desired in recent years, for sure. And in fact, going back even to 2K16 when they had the supposed Hall of Fame rating scale, kind of oversold that. But next up is Roger Ward at RAJJ888. Of course, Roger and Nate on the show a few weeks back, friends of the show. Believe it or not, I was really pumped for the release of NBA Live 2001, followed by 06. I can understand that.
Big surprise. Yeah, big surprise on Live 2001, Roger.
Yeah,
Live 2006, they had mentioned on the podcast that they had been revisiting that and played a few games and whatnot. I think that NBA Live 06, their advertising for that game was absolutely top-notch. I remember all the commercials for that game. I remember the talk about Freestyle Superstars, all of that stuff. And even though they were moving on to next gen, there was still a ton of advertising for that PS2 version. And I think that that's going to be something that they really need a good team in place for when NBA Live returns. I do think they're going to return. They need a strong marketing team, and they need to market the NBA side of the game, and they really need to show off gameplay in the right manner, etc., like they did in the past.
It is funny, and I brought this up when we were talking to Nate and Roger on the show, that 2001 was such a controversial release in our community, and a lot of people didn't like it for PC back then. And yet you and I have gone back and revisited it, and I feel pretty good about it. And I remember being quite critical of it, and I still have my criticisms of it that I stand by from back in the day and things that I've noticed since. But I've also, and maybe it's looking at it with fresh eyes, obviously, and no more expectations because it's an old game. I have newer games that I like if I want to play something newer, so there's no pressure on it. I do think in many respects it was a solid follow-up to Live 2000. I think 2000 is the superior game across the board. Again, 2001 was hampered a little bit by that switch to a new code base, but 2001 still holds up pretty well. It's a fun retro gaming experience these days at the very least, and 06 is one of my favorites as well. I talk about disappointment with 2001, but I do remember that there was a lot of hype and speculation at the time. Live was obviously in its golden era or coming off it, and it was still the brand, it was still the top brand, and certainly the one that was coming out on all the platforms, because 2K was getting a lot of buzz after that first NBA 2K, but again, it was a Dreamcast exclusive, so not everybody could really enjoy that. So there was definitely buzz before 2001, so I definitely understand that, but it's interesting that it is such a favorite of Nate and Roger, but in our community it was very controversial.
Same reasons I enjoyed revisiting NBA Live 15 are the same reasons I enjoyed revisiting NBA Live 2001, because it's that control, right?
Yeah.
Live 2001 doesn't have very many canned animations, neither does Live 15. I also really want Roger and Nate to get on Parsec. So I got to direct them to that Parsec tutorial I made, and I want them to connect with me on a game like NBA Live 15, because knowing the way they like to play the games, I think they would both have an absolute blast connecting and playing that. And hell, you know what? I like those guys enough where I would just host and watch them play against each other using my Xbox One. I would do that for you guys. So I guess stay tuned for that, because I think I'll be able to get them on it.
And next up is Nate Stasho, at Nate Stasho on Twitter. And this actually goes back to your story about your brother and the midnight release. Says, I waited in line for midnight release of Call of Duty Black Ops, but never an NBA game though. Live 2005 as a kid looked so awesome, went from 01 to 04 and couldn't wait for 05 after I saw the commercials. Again, the hype that those commercials created, the quality of the game at the time that was, and people can look back at it now and say, oh, those were primitive, but they were cutting edge at the time. And they hold up. They hold up a lot better than people think. Some great games there, obviously. But yeah, Nate never waiting in line for an NBA game.
Well, Live 2005, Live 2004, those games at the time for NBA Live, they screamed NBA, right?
Yeah.
They screamed NBA action. They promoted the games the right way. They promoted the athletes the right way, and they put the tender love and care into the ratings and everything else. That's not a surprise to me that he was super excited about Live 2005. So were we. My brothers and I spent a lot of time with those games. And I just feel like the love isn't there for the NBA portions of the games.
I was just trying to think if I never had a midnight release for a basketball game. And the only one that I can think of was 2K14 and Live 14, because I went to a midnight launch for the PS4. Yeah, that was the only midnight launch I had for a basketball game. But I haven't got a lot of day one releases where I pre-ordered and picked it up on the day or had it posted to me. Actually, Live 06 PC was released early. So EB Games, which is the Australian version of GameStop, accidentally put out the PC version, I think, a week early or something, and it was a big thing in the forum. Fellow Aussie noted that and posted that in the forum, so I was actually at work at the time and browsing the forum when I probably shouldn't have been. So I put in a call to Mum and said, hey, can you pick that up, and I'll, so it's there for me after work, and she did. Shout out to you, Mum. And yeah, so I got it a week early, and of course we're all happy about that and bragging about it. And that never happened again because EA were not happy about the early Breaking the Street date for that game, Live 06 PC. So that never happened again. But for one glorious time in the basketball gaming history, Australia got a game first.
There you go. I mean, that's memorable, especially for you because, like you said, you get them late a lot of the time. So that definitely works out. I also wanted to point out that for NBA 2K14, I think I had mentioned this like 100 episodes ago. I traveled to Massachusetts, so I traveled about an hour outside of where I live. And I went to a Microsoft store in a mall, and they pre-release, they had like NBA 2K14 set up on an Xbox One, and for us to be able to try it. And I remember spending an hour and a half, 2 hours at that Microsoft store with my girlfriend at the time. And I'm sure she wanted to leave. I mean, she tried it too. But I spent a long time there just playing NBA 2K14 and trying it and everything. And it was just awesome. It was awesome playing it. The graphics popped. We were playing on a really big screen and whatnot. But yeah, I was super excited about the NBA 2K14 next gen release.
Teddy Bear the Gamer at 317 Teddy Bear on Twitter. A game that he remembers being excited about at launch was 2K11. MF Don at DonMega_C agrees. Big facts. I actually walked to the shop to get that instead of ordering online. Same for NBA Jam 2010 around that time as well. So yeah, 2K11 is one that stands out in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, I mean, it was the return of Jordan. It was also a new motion system for the video game, completely revamped gameplay really over NBA 2K10. The advertising around it was ridiculous. I can't say that enough. Yeah, 2K11 is still considered by many the greatest basketball video game ever made.
And that's always a very contentious debate because I see some people saying NBA Street Volume 2, which is a very strong candidate as well. But once you start mixing the sim and arcade genres, it does get very murky because there are people who do prefer the sim style and those who prefer the arcade games like Jam in the Street, and it's hard to put one over the other when they both deliver obviously great basketball gaming experiences, but very different basketball gaming experiences.
Oh, 100%. I think it's cool too that he mentioned NBA Jam OFE and then also NBA 2K11 because that shows you the type of variety that we had back then, right?
Oh,
you know,
it
he
does.
gets sick of 2K. Gets sick of 2K11 or 5-on-5 gameplay, or even just wants to switch it up, he was able to turn on NBA Jam on Fire Edition. So, and both incredibly strong games. I mean, hell, it's 2022, and I could end this podcast, walk into my apartment, and put on both of those games back to back and have a good time.
And in fact, we could fire up Parsec after we finished recording and play International Basketball 2009 and laugh. But we do need to do that.
We're not playing that. But because I'm a weird collector, my first response to you when you were sharing highlights of International Basketball 09 was what?
I need that.
I want that game.
I want that, yeah.
I need that. It was. I don't even know if I want that. I was like, I need that. Like, I need that game. And that's how weird I am. It's like the kid sports basketball thing. It's like, we played it. Sure. The game is terrible. It's not a good basketball game. But I need that game. Because I need it as part of my collection.
You're saying you'd like me to chuck that in the box that I send over in a week or so?
Don't send me kid sports basketball. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, actually, if you want to throw that, hey, listen, if you want to throw in any games, any basketball games that you have copies of, I will take them. I wasn't kidding about that, actually, because even though kid sports basketball wasn't that great when we played it, I still enjoyed the overall experience of connecting with a friend on it, right?
True,
and
exactly.
Using Ginger Clay and understanding the game.
Clay.
And my brother and I talked about this because he makes fun of me for it sometimes. He's like, "Oh, you're always putting on these old games." And I was like, listen, one of the best parts of putting on these old games is trying to get into the developers' minds and the decision makers' minds and say, you know, what were you thinking when you did this, right? Or overall just thinking, what were they thinking when they made this animation in the game, or this presentation item, or this type of roster editing feature? Like, I love looking at what they were doing with the technology at the times, and then how they were making and trying to get into the minds of what they were thinking when they made the games this way. So that's what I told him. I was like, that's why I love revisiting these games all the time.
I think when it comes to kids sports basketball, what was going through the developers' minds was, oh, it's for kids. Who cares?
Right. It was more along the lines of, this game doesn't need to be good.
Shovel this out. Yeah, shovel this out.
Right. Shovel this out. This doesn't need to be good. People will buy it. And it's so cheaply made that we'll make a profit. I think that's probably what it was.
Oh, speaking of profits, or certainly lots of copies sold, I was looking up NBA basketball for Intellivision, which I do own, but I was also getting some screenshots from the emulated version of it on Intellivision Lives for the PlayStation 2, because obviously you get a much better picture than trying to hook up the Intellivision to a capture card, if that is indeed possible. Haven't given that a try yet. And I looked up they had some trivia about the game, some interesting notes, and it sold an estimated 500,000 copies in the late 70s, early 80s. That's pretty impressive, especially before the video game crash.
That is incredibly impressive, because if you actually look at that game now, I mean, there's really no replay value, but it really shows you what was entertaining back then. Right?
Absolutely.
You know, people make fun of it today. Oh, like double dribble. Like, listen, back when we were playing double dribble, it was still fresh. And we didn't care back then. I don't even remember ever questioning it. We didn't care that it didn't have a season mode or a tournament mode or anything like that. We just wanted to connect on the sticks with a buddy, or like with one of my brothers or something like that. We just wanted to connect on the sticks and have a fun, competitive game. And what's funny is that's kind of what we're doing today, right?
Sure.
That's what we're doing on Parsec today. All ages, guys, you know, in their early 20s, people that are joining the Discord in their late teens, people in their 30s. Hell, we have a couple people, I think, on the Discord in their early 40s. What are they doing? They're connecting on these games like Double Dribble, older games, NBA in the Zone, NBA in the Zone 2, etc. You and I are connecting on all these games. Why? We're not playing a season. We're not playing a My League. We're not playing a Dynasty. We're not playing a franchise. We're not doing all this. We're not doing these crazy challenges or anything like that. We're doing it to have that shared experience, the same exact shared experience that we had in the late 80s playing games like Double Dribble. So if you look at it that way, people, like, and I'd love to say this to some of the younger crowd as well, but if you look at it that way, that's where you can see where there was still an appeal to play these older games, right?
Definitely. We're big advocates, as we've said before, of retro basketball gaming. Going back to an old favorite if you're not enjoying the latest game. That's what I've been doing the past couple of months.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why online connectivity needs to be sharp, even for just like exhibition games. So if people can't meet in the same household, like we're able to have a sharp online connectivity using Parsec. But I'm talking about integrated online connectivity in the game, like via NBA 2K or NBA Live. There needs to be good matchmaking and good connectivity so people can still share those experiences like we did when we were younger.
Next up is KnowledgeBone at The Harassment on Twitter, talking about pre-release excitement. Not so much anymore. They are always typically the same game as the previous year, and the whole pay-to-play or in-game purchases, whatever you want to call it, really kills some of the excitement. I miss the days of needing skill to unlock content. The most exciting for me was NBA Live 95, the first game that there was some real buzz about. Absolutely game-changing in its day in terms of graphics and gameplay. Once again, that resonates with me completely, Derek. Obviously, the issue of pay-to-play and in-game purchases, missing the days of unlocking the rewards from simply playing the game, which has come back with the season approach in My Team and MyCAREER, but as a lot of people have pointed out, they're not necessarily great rewards. People have brought that up on Twitter, and of course they're shouted down immediately, oh, it's free, you don't have to pay for these, you're always complaining, you're whining, you're never happy. But it's fair to point out that the unlockables aren't necessarily feel worth the time and effort it takes to grind up and unlock them. That's kind of a point. They're supposed to be fun, so if they're failing in that regard, it's only fair to point it out. As for Live 95, obviously, there was great buzz about that back in the day, and you look at the jump it made from Showdown to Live 95, one of the biggest year-to-year jumps in basketball gaming, and certainly in the NBA Live series, definitely a game changer. Graphics and gameplay, Live 95 is one of my favorites. It's spectacular. Been playing it recently, posted some screenshots, and we connected on that. We connected that on Parsec recently, and played a bit of a playoff series. So we forgot to mention that at the top of the show. But yeah, I absolutely agree 100% with KnowledgeBone there.
A couple things really quick. NBA Live 95, when we connected, Steve Kerr bailed us out. So we actually did win, but this was hilarious. So Andrew and I were down by 8 points, and there was I think 1 minute left.
About that.
And Andrew goes into the sub screen, and he's like, all right, we got to get Kerr in here. Throws Steve Kerr into the game. I think he subbed out BJ Armstrong. And we take the floor. No, it was Pete Myers.
Pete Myers, yes.
Yeah. So Steve Kerr takes the floor and immediately buries 3 threes in a row, and we go up 1 and we win the game.
Yeah.
And unbelievable performance. Then the next game that we played, I think we blew out the computer by about 15 or 20. I think it was the Knicks. But no, that was really fun connecting on that. And it worked really well overall on my end. And I think we were really getting the hang of it before I had to disconnect in that second game. I did want to bring something up, though, really quick, because the first part of his statement is, again, talking about the stale gameplay. And, he brings up and he says, it feels like it's just like a roster update when they release a new 2K. Obviously, it's not just a roster update. They do add things like terrible contact dunk meters. They change up the post game a little bit, etc. But overall, what he's getting to is that the gameplay overall has gotten stale. He'd like to have excitement around the on-court action and the feel of that game. So I definitely 100% understand what he's saying in that regard. And as far as he talked about skill gap, we mentioned this before. Some of the worst players at NBA 2K can be superstars in the video game because of the artificial boosts and the way the gameplay is set up. Like the video you showed me of you playing against the computer and them just rifling off step back threes from a foot inside half court and just burying them over and over and over again. That has absolutely nothing to do with them being good at the game. That has everything to do with them having artificial boosts that allows them to just cheese the game. Right. So I definitely understand what he's saying in that regard. So I actually really appreciated his response, because I think those two pieces that he mentioned are the biggest issues that people have with the series right now.
They really do. And we've talked about that before, the 2K fatigue and not feeling that it's moving in the right direction, obviously, but certainly that it's the same old. And when they do change it up, as you said, it's not always a change for the better. It just seems to be a change for change's sake, or it's an ill-advised idea. You can see where they're coming from with it, but it just not a good idea.
But yeah, no, definitely thanks for the response. But yeah, NBA Live 95, when we connected on that on Parsec, not only did it work really well, completely clear on my end, no lag spikes or anything like that. I just thought that for a fun, ridiculous up and down style basketball game, it definitely hit the spot when we connected.
It did, because we were also playing arcade as well, because I wanted to kind of speed run the playoffs so that I could get some screenshots and video of winning the championship in Live 95 for Super Nintendo. So we just we said, okay, let's make this a bit easier. But we thought it was going to be easy, but then it wasn't.
They shot 87%.
Yeah.
So the first game that we won, okay, the one where we had to bring in Steve Kerr to do some heroics, the computer shot like 87% from the field on starter. Ridiculous. They would not miss anywhere on the floor. They call that starter difficulty. Since when does the computer shooting 87% for a game constitute as starter? That was ridiculous.
It was insane. I will say that I did notice a problem that we were having is that we were both trying to abuse the hand check to get the pushing steals.
That's not even a hand check. That's not even a hand check. That's a full on.
That's a shove.
You are extending both arms shove.
That's a flagrant foul.
That would make the 88-89 Detroit Pistons jealous.
It really is. But because it's the same button as shoot, so you and I were both mashing that to get the cheap steals with the hand check button, and then firing up shots from half court and full court as well. So that hurt us a couple of times. But yeah, Steve Kerr with the heroics, not unlike the '97 finals, of course. But next up we have Big Cos Media at Cosy Cosman on Twitter, talking about the excitement of the new game releases. Absolutely, especially when I would go to Blockbuster after seeing the ads for the games. I love the SNES, Genesis to PS2, OG Xbox and GameCube era of basketball video games, and some PS3 360 era ones were good. I used to go every Friday with my bro and pops, that is to Blockbuster. I know you can relate to that. We do have Blockbuster, or should I say we did have Blockbuster in Australia. It wasn't the main chain. It was either Video Easy or Civic Video around my way. But again, going to the video store and renting games when they were new or certainly been out for a while. So many great memories of doing that in the 90s.
When he mentioned Blockbuster, automatically all the early 2000s memories for me just came flooding back. We lived at Blockbuster. So basically what ended up happening for us was we'd be playing basketball. My friend Craig and I, we would play basketball 5 hours a day. No joke. Like if we had school, because I was in high school at the time, if we had school, we would play basketball after school, and then we would try to find an outdoor court to play at after school. So play until it got dark, when it was nice out and whatnot, or we'd try to find another indoor court after school as well to go play. And then what we would do at night, because we were hanging out all the time, is once it got dark, we would go to a local Blockbuster. We either tried to rent a movie or rent a game, and then we would head back to the apartment and have like salsa con queso with chips or something like that, and play NBA Inside Drive 2002 or NBA Inside Drive 2003, etc., or NBA Live 2003. It was actually more NBA Inside Drive with him. We played a lot of that. But yeah, we loved Blockbuster. There was also this place that was down the street from my house that I used to ride my bike to. It was like connected. It was like a small video store next to the local post office, and they allowed you to rent older games. So it was like Sega Genesis games and Super NES games. And I would at times, ride my bike down to that store, and I'd pick up Madden 94 or Madden 96 or a basketball title or something like that. And I'd ride my bike back to my house, and I would play it with my two brothers. And the cool thing about that place was they also sold games. So they had games that you could rent for a lot cheaper than Blockbuster. So it was only like $1 or $2 to rent a game. But then you could also buy games for cheap there. There were definitely a lot of Super NES and Sega Genesis and even Nintendo games that I picked up from that little store. But definitely loved Blockbuster. A lot of memories going there late at night and just walking around the store and looking at all the movies and different games and everything. So thanks for bringing those memories back.
I feel like when we were kids and going to the video store like that, that was how we experienced a lot of games. Like, I had my collection at home, but I feel like I rented a lot of the games that I played over the years, and some of them I've gone on to buy, being a collector. And Live 95, for example, Super Nintendo version of Live 95, I didn't own that until years later. The first NBA Live game I owned was Live 96 PC, which is one of the reasons I feel so nostalgic for that game. But Live 95 for Super Nintendo was a frequent rental.
Yeah, I think the thing that was tough with rentals was we didn't get them for long enough. So you'd have them for like five days or something like that, and then you'd have to return them. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was for Blockbuster. I want to say that you could rent them for up to a week, and then you had to return them.
Usually,
or
yeah.
Something like that.
I mean, you could save. You could some of the games you could save, obviously, even on the cartridges with battery backup. But was that save going to be there the next time you rented it? Probably not.
Right, exactly. Obviously, the selection in places like Blockbuster and even the small video stores was pretty limited. And especially a place like Blockbuster, which was so commercial, like you would get the newer titles in there all the time. But if you tried to like find anything that was older than a year or two, you wouldn't be able to get it.
When you found a store that had a great wide selection, even of course with videos back then and movies and NBA tapes as well, sometimes that was difficult to find, at least here in Australia, probably not so much over there. But when you found that with great, huge selection of NBA tapes, or for me, wrestling tapes in the late 90s, or video games to hire, again, like finding buried treasure. You'd want to go there. You'd spend all your money there.
Yeah, you know what the biggest downfall of Blockbuster was at the start was Redbox. And I hated Redbox because it wasn't the same experience. So what the cool thing about Blockbuster was you were able to like walk into the store. And I know this sounds cheesy or whatever, but you get to interact with people, right?
Sure.
You see other people in there, and then you get to interact with the store clerk and whatnot. But you had the whole experience of looking at all the different boxes and finding something new maybe you hadn't seen before, and going to the video game wall or going into like the horror section, stuff like that. But then the Redbox came around, and Redbox is just a literal red box that sits outside like a Walmart or sits outside a Walgreens or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like a kiosk, and then you put like $1 in or $2 in, and it spits out the movie or game, and then you're on your way. And it just kind of killed the experience for me. It just wasn't the same. And then, obviously, killing Blockbuster even further, or places like Blockbuster, is things like Netflix, right? And on-demand movies and everything like that. So why would you go to a video store when you can just grab that stuff at home? And that's also what's killing stores and malls, right? Like, we have a local mall here that used to be full of stores and activity, and it's dead now because of what is everybody doing? They're shopping on Amazon, right? They're shopping online. So I definitely miss the in-person, face-to-face interactions and the in-person interactions with the products. And I miss that basically the feeling of getting excited to go out into these establishments.
Oh, I can definitely relate. There was a great video game store that was around my way, FX All Games, back in the day. Long gone, unfortunately. But it was so great as a Nintendo fanboy in the 90s, being able to go in there, and they had a great trade-in system with their used games. They sold new games as well, but they had used games where you would trade in one of yours plus a nominal fee, at the time $5 to $7, to swap the game. And that's how my collection would change over the years, and how I'd get to experience new games in addition to renting as well. There was always a great vibe going there. Saying to Dad on Saturdays, "Oh, can you take me to FX Games?" "Oh yeah, we'll go to FX Games every couple of months or so." It was great to trade in games. Actually got, I think I got Live 96 PC there. I got NBA Jam Tournament Edition for PC there, and a couple of other ones that are still in my collection to this day, those original copies. So a lot of great memories of that. Actually found there's a retro gaming store open near me. I saw the ad on Instagram, of all places. Usually I skip through such ads, but I did see that ad. Whenever I see an ad for a retro game store in Australia, be it one that does postage, obviously, or one that's local, I always take a look. And I found one, so I might have to go and check it out sometime.
There you go. What was the name of that store?
It was FX All Games was its name, and there was also a membership program where you would get discounts and things. I think I still have my card somewhere, so I don't want to throw it out as much as that makes me sound like a hoarder, although with my,
I still have my old Blockbuster card, and they haven't been around for years, so.
It's the memories, yeah. So next up is Thundershack at Thunder_Shack on Twitter. As far as feeling excitement for new releases, says, I do not, and it really coincides with my waning desire to play the modes. 2K17 was the last release I finished my rookie season in MyCAREER. 2K20 was the last release I put much time into my team. each year I have less reason to move on to the next release. I'm an offline player. The last time 2K added a new mode was 2K14, LeBron Path to Greatness. If all I have to is play now in my league, there isn't a point. I'll have to fix their bad default rosters just to enjoy it. I don't have 2K22 and got more excited re-downloading 2K13 recently.
So, pretty wild that NBA 2K14 LeBron Path to Greatness is really the last time they added something new for an offline mode, right?
It is, yeah. I hadn't thought of it, but that's absolutely right.
That is wild, and I suppose somebody could say, well, they add all of this new content to my team, right? But that's a little bit different because there's a grind to that mode that you feel like you shouldn't have to deal with. And then there's also obviously the intense push to get you to buy packs and, pay for microtransactions, etc. So yeah, it is pretty wild that we're coming up on a decade of no new added on offline modes. So I definitely sympathize with him there. I know that he stuck with 2K20 PC with his classic teams rosters, etc., and that he didn't move on to the newest 2Ks. And that's not very surprising because, as others have stated, they are not exactly, how do I say, elated about the gameplay, right? They don't think it's taken a big enough jump in order to make them make the switch. There hasn't been any enhancements really in customization on the console space or in the game by default that makes people really want to make that switch. So it doesn't surprise me that he's stuck with 2K20 or that he's frustrated that we haven't had any new real offline modes since LeBron Path to Greatness.
And of course, with my team, that content is gone once the servers are shut down. So it's you're kind of renting it, really.
It's so ridiculous. I still can't believe they do that. They charge you $60 or $70, sometimes more if you want to get more virtual currency and whatnot and rewards. But they'll charge you those base prices. And we talked about this with Stildo33 when he was on the show. But they charge you full price. They advertise that My Team content. They advertise that online content in order to get you to buy the game, and then they rip it away from you a couple years later. I'll just never understand why that's okay and why more people don't speak up about that.
I saw a comment in the NBA 2K subreddit, the official NBA 2K subreddit recently, that said, look, I'm quite happy to drop an extra $60 to $100 on a game if I'm enjoying it. And I get where they're coming from by saying that, but not only does that give 2K license to make the base product weaker, but wasn't it better when you didn't have to do that to enjoy a game? Like, I like being able to just spend that base price and get a great experience. All this stuff has been normalized over the years, and people just accept it. And I guess to a certain extent you do. You accept it and you either put up with it or play something else. Fair enough. But I just don't get why people defend these practices and they don't look at how things used to be and think, hey, that was actually better value for money. That was better. We're kind of getting screwed here. But people just say, oh, go play an old game, old head, and if that's what you want, well, okay, I will, so I don't have to deal with this stuff. But yeah, the way that people will defend these practices, these anti-consumer practices, it continues to really confuse me why people will shill for companies like that.
No, I'm sorry. Call me an old head, people, but I'm having more fun with the games that I'm playing than you are.
Yeah.
Putting in all that money, I'm sorry. And how about that tweet that you shared with me about a 2K player who said that, he was fed up, but was willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in years past on My Team packs. Remember that? You shared that tweet with me. And it's unbelievable that for years, that person was willing to, I think it was the last couple of years or last 3 years or whatever, that person spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on My Team, and now all of a sudden he's fed up. Like, are you kidding me? You should never have spent that money in the first place. That speaks to the problem. It took you years to be fed up after spending all of that money over the top of the base price of the game. That's a huge red flag. And that happens with Madden, too, by the way, with Madden Ultimate Team. But it's a huge red flag.
Oh, it's why games are making bank these days. And by the way, people say that, they need that money because games are expensive to produce, which they are. But a lot of that money from microtransactions and whatnot are going towards bonuses for executives who do not put in the hard work for games in the first place, to the creation of games in the first place. So it's not a good argument at all. Yeah,
these companies were surviving in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and early 2010s without microtransactions.
Yeah.
That's not, they don't need it to survive. I'm really sorry. I'm never going to buy that as an excuse. For decades, these companies have been perfectly fine without extra charges over the top of the regular price of the game. And you can say, well, games are more expensive to make and everything today, but that is not an excuse to absolutely gouge people's pockets and put gambling mechanics in their face at all times when they turn on the game.
I've also seen people suggest that the journey in my career and whatnot would be not as fun if there wasn't as much grinding or the possibility of speeding up with the pay-to-upgrade mechanics. And I'm sorry, that's just excusing weak, lazy game design, or game design that is meant to push recurrent revenue mechanics and not fun. So once again, that's something that you and I will not buy. Not only will we not buy VC, we do not buy the arguments in favor of microtransactions either. Next up, we have Scorpion Soldier Gaming at CJ_CAD50 on Twitter. I feel like the games from 360, PS3 era and older have a specific soul to them, especially the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era. The only games this generation that gave me that feeling were 2K14 and 2K16 on Xbox One. 2K22 almost from a single-player standpoint, exhibition/my league. Unpopular opinion as well, but I feel NBA Live 19 also has that specific soul to it. I have updated rosters on there to a certain extent before recent trades, as well as a real enjoyable game setting slider set. Definitely one of my favourite NBA games this generation, believe it or not. So that's an interesting response as well. I certainly relate to that 360 PS3 era being that kind of last era that I was really excited about, and also early 8th generation as well. Live 19, that's an interesting take on that one.
Well, so the last game that my brothers and I were super excited about was NBA 2K18 and what happened with that. That was the last game that we were like incredibly excited about because we loved NBA 2K17, right? So NBA 2K18 was right around the corner, and we're like, oh my God, if they even make more improvements over NBA 2K17, then this could be the best NBA 2K ever. And then NBA 2K18 was a complete flop in our household, and we absolutely couldn't stand it. And you saw the negative reaction to that release. And some people now say it's the worst NBA 2K ever made. There's people out there that think it's the worst one they ever put together. I definitely agree with him about something special, being special about those Xbox 360, PS3 era games and prior. It feels like there was a lot more love put into the games from a presentation element on the NBA side of things, etc. And all the special things they were trying to do with those games. Definitely agree on that. With NBA Live 19, it's a very weird situation. I wasn't optimistic for NBA Live 19. I didn't really like Live 18 that much. I talked about this on the NLSC forum and even put a YouTube video together about it. Live 19, I did not have that super exciting feel. I did enjoy the demo, and then they ruined the game, in my opinion, in many ways with patches. They made it sluggish. They made it feel more canned. It started to feel not as fun, etc. So I would say probably for me, the last game that I loved instantly when I picked up the sticks was NBA 2K17.
I think that was the case for me as well. Live 19, as I've said before, I feel like it had an identity crisis, if you will. It didn't know whether it wanted to be street or live, and kind of was an ineffective mishmash of both. A lot of people do love 19, and that's cool to see. Again, that speaks to the reason to keep the NBA Live series going, although I do think they need to sort out what the game's identity should be, and I would prefer it to be more like your classic lives rather than that street live hybrid. But clearly, it did resonate with a lot of people. So again, we'd love to see live continue because there is an audience for it. It may not be the same size as 2K. In fact, we can say that right now it certainly isn't. But the interest is there, and Live 19 did things that resonated with gamers, with basketball gamers. So by all means, EA, you've got an audience there.
People want to get excited again.
They do.
And this is the perfect time for EA Sports or another company, let's say, I don't know, like San Diego Studios who make MLB The Show, another company to jump into the space, advertise the hell out of your game, market the hell out of it, get people excited about maybe a new gameplay mode or new special feature or anything like that, and just promote great gameplay and all that stuff. This would be a great time for somebody to come into the space and get people excited again.
Next up, we have Villa Cage at iMasonKOG on Twitter. I remember when 2K12 came out. I went to the midnight release, and these dudes that were in line recognized each other. I guess they fought at the club the weekend before, and one of them said, "After you get your game, I've got something for you," and showed his gun. Okay, that's a pretty wild midnight launch.
That, I know this sounds weird, but I wish I was there for that because that's super exciting. I know that sounds odd. Maybe I just love the drama or whatnot. But no, that I've done a midnight release before. I've been to one, and nothing like that happened. But 2K12, let's focus on something not bar brawl related. 2K12 was such a highly anticipated release because 2K11 was so strong, and they did such a good job with 2K12 marketing the legends again. Remember the cover, the covers with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and everything, and Michael Jordan. They did such a good job of marketing the classic players and then the current NBA, and there was all the commercials for it and all of that stuff. And 2K12 didn't disappoint either. I thought it was another really strong release for 2K. It's one that my brothers and I just spent a ton of time on.
It was an uphill battle because, of course, you had the looming lockout, which did extend into the season and ended up cancelling games and pushing the season back to December, of course. But that was what made the addition of NBA's Greatest and the expansion beyond the Jordan Challenge into the other legends as well. That was such a great idea that 2K obviously saw the lockout coming. And look, more historical content was probably in the pipeline anyway, because the Jordan Challenge was such a hit. Why not expand upon that? But at the same time, it was such a great idea with the lockout threatening the start of the season, and of course you can't release that game with new rookies and updated rosters, so patch that in later, and the new historical content is the fresh stuff at launch. So that was a brilliant move on 2K's part.
Yeah, they had the meat, right?
Yeah.
The game had enough meat to it that would get people through. And I think that they knocked it out of the park with NBA 2K11, 2K12, 2K13. And basically those three titles in succession, I think they knocked it out of the park with all three.
Dante Campana at Dante Campana on Twitter. About pre-release hype and launch day excitement. Not anymore. There's only one game in town now, and this game has decided to invest in gimmicks and become a GTA lookalike instead of a real NBA sim. This has come to fruition at the cost of what makes the NBA unique: authenticity. I rest my case. The days before an NBA Live release in the 90s and early 2000s were magical. I miss that feeling. Yeah, this has been a common theme throughout the responses in the mailbag, that the lack of competition and the way they approached the marketing of the game back in the day felt so much more exciting. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Lack of competition, lack of authenticity, and focusing on the wrong things. Point blank. And I think, like I said, I think that's hitting basically the hot button. That's what is getting people frustrated and disappointed year in and year out. And that's why we need competition.
And the next response echoes those sentiments as well. Mugen Asakura at Lo-Fi Samurai 11 on Twitter. I miss the passion for the game of basketball put into these games. I feel like NBA Live 18 and 19 had that heart, but I feel like 2K has lacked it since 2K 16 and 17. It's all about entertainment, memes, and pay-to-win cycles. Society has turned hoops into a gimmicks fest. And yes, that is, we've talked about that before on so many occasions, and it continues to be an issue. It's what's certainly pushed us, I think, to go back to old favourites over trying to deal with this approach and this fortnight with basketball, if you will. And that sounds cynical, but a lot of people are saying that because it feels kind of true. Or GTA Online, that MMORPG experience. And look, I know there are passionate people working on NBA 2K, but they have to fall in line with what the suits want. And suits want to make a lot of money with these mechanics that aren't necessarily about fun. In fact, they're very rarely about fun because that's not an effective way of making money. Or certainly not as effective as the grindy mechanics and gouging. So we can see a lot of people feel, as we do, jaded with these recent releases because of the approach.
Yeah, there's that word gimmick again.
Yes.
That people are using. It definitely feels gimmicky. I think what happened is the strong gameplay and authenticity has taken a backseat to artificial boosts and canned sequences. That's the way I feel about it. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. And then lies, too. Like, we've talked about the developer blog, how there's definitely a lot of half-truths or blatant lies that get told each year just to market the game. And marketing is always going to be,
BS, to some extent.
Yeah, and some of it's going to be BS to some extent. But it just gets really old year in and year out, all the broken promises and all the half-truths or like I said, the total lies.
The goodwill has been very much eroded at this point. We feel jaded because we haven't been given a reason to extend that goodwill, because we haven't had that goodwill extended to us. And the trust has been broken by so many blogs that have come out that have the next year admitted, oh, this thing that we said was a really good idea, actually that was a Band-Aid fix for a problem we had with the new motion system. And look, of course they're not going to come out with a blog and say, well, the new motion system is kind of working. We think it's going to be good in the future, so we've kind of got a Band-Aid fix for it now. No, they're not going to say that. But it's the blatant lie about it, and then the gall to come out next year and admit that it's a lie. But nobody ever really calls them on that. I mean, you and I do, but, well, we know the situation with influencers and what they need to do to keep their influence and keep their access, but there's some blatant lies that have not been called out, or they've been very much swept under the rug.
But Andrew, you're not a blue check. You're not like a major influencer or a paid major influencer. So, shouldn't I just listen to them who say it's the greatest gameplay ever in the first couple of weeks when it's released?
I guess so.
Shouldn't I just listen to them? Shouldn't I just listen to them, and including developers that say things like, oh, well, the post game is back. The post game is back, people, even though the post game isn't as good as it was in many of their past releases.
Why did it go away? Why did it go away? Why is it back?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where'd it go? But, you're not, why should we listen to you, Andrew? And see, that's the problem, is it's an uphill battle. It's a constant... It's who has the influence and how many people are listening to the wrong people, and unfortunately a lot of people are listening to the wrong people, and that's including people that are making these games. It's listening to the suits, and unfortunately a lot of people have to do that to keep their jobs, but they're listening to these people who are giving poor direction on how to make these games and how to make these games enjoyable for consumers and have them hungry for and coming back for more. And you can say whatever you want. I'll say this again, of course they're going to have 10 million plus sales every year. It's the only option in the 5-on-5 gaming space right now. So I don't want to hear, well, they're selling this many copies. Yeah, there's only one option for people who love NBA.
Bego Fats at Bego Fats on Twitter has not felt that excitement in a long time. Says, I remember I missed class for 2K5. Have you ever missed class or perhaps work, Derek, to either buy a game at launch or to simply to just take some time off and play it?
I have, I believe, called out of work before to play a game. I'll be honest with you. I think it was in the early 2000s. I want to say that I was working at Shaw's at the time. I think I was pushing carts for Shaw's and cashiering. And I want to say that I did call out of a shift in order to play. I want to say, was it NBA Live 2001? It might have been. It might have been NBA Live 2001 or NBA Live 2002. So yes, I think I have done that in the past.
I'm not sure if I've ever... Actually, not for a new game, but there was a time when my cousin was visiting, and I was a casual at the time, and instead of calling in to see if there was work for me, which there could have been, I could have got some money, I actually decided to spend time with my cousin, and because we hadn't caught up in a while, and just play games all day before he had to leave for his job. So that's probably the closest I've come to calling out of work for it. Don't think I ever skipped school or anything like that. But yeah, I do see some stories like that, and of course, once again with Live 06 PC, when I called Mum to see if she could do a shopping run to pick that up. But yeah, video games, serious business.
Really has been for a long time for us, right? I think video games have been serious business for me even since like the late 80s, which is wild. I know that sounds like it ages me, but we really started playing video games when we were young. I like I stated, I've said this many times, I remember playing Double Dribble as like a 5-year-old in the late 80s, and just like having a blast with it and playing against my dad, and then playing against my brothers and whatnot.
So next up is One Kidney Kenny at One Kidney Kenny on Twitter, and of course Stildo33 in the forum. The last one I waited for was 2K16 at midnight. This was when they started releasing all the newer classic teams from 2000s. It was back when My League offline mode was amazing. I'd do it again if they actually cared about those users. Would be fun. They can add new content, 2000 paces would be baller, Reggie is needed, lots of other fun teams could be made/added. I did it because of the new modes and content. I went to the midnight release every year until this year, so I was in my mid-30s still, man, LOL. So to go back to what I said at the beginning of the segment, it's not just a matter of being in your 30s and being immediately becoming jaded and giving up on it.
How can you not love Ken? The guy's in his mid-30s. He's talking about being in his 30s, and he's still showing up for midnight releases of basketball video games. Good for him.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that people, because that we are the generation that was growing up during the video games, the boom, right? The boot, like with Nintendo and Super NES and Sega Genesis and Sega CD, and I'll even say like systems like Jaguar 64 and the excitement that was around that. Not even a real 64-bit system, but they sure as hell advertised it that way. PlayStation and PlayStation 2, like we grew up with all of this stuff. We really are lifelong gamers. And if you enjoyed video games that much as a kid, chances are you still like love video games. Like that's the way I look at it. And we're noticing that in the Parsec gaming community and on the NLSC in general, that, we're not the only ones in our 30s that are playing these games still. There's a lot of people out there.
Well, like you said, we grew up with them. So that is a hobby that we feel that is comforting to us, that is enjoyable to us, that we will happily go back to when we have the time. And it's like we've said before, as long as you're taking care of your business, that's fine.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's just what we choose to do. And as long as we take care of our business and life, that's what matters.
You mentioned Brent Lane, playing with him recently. And, of course, he's also involved with the NCAA Basketball 10 modding in the forum as well. His response, he says he still wishes he could get that excited about it. I don't remember the last time I felt that way about a video game. I remember when 2K15 was announced as next gen, pre-ordering it and then staying up all night that night, starting my career. Nothing like that anymore, but maybe 2K23 will have something crazy again and get me ready. And I think we're still holding out for that every year, even if we do feel jaded and skeptical and whatnot. We still want the games to be good, so we're not going in there wanting to hate. And it may come across that way to some people, and that's really misrepresenting our critique of video games. We love basketball video games, Derek. We want them to be good, but that's that nagging thought in the back of your mind and that recent disappointment and feeling more skeptical and jaded when you see those developer blogs that have those lies in some cases. That's just natural.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference between being a quote-unquote hater and then, having 2K and then also having like 2K fatigue or being frustrated with the company's decisions, right? You're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to critique. You're allowed to, you're allowed to scream from the rooftops about issues that you're having with the games. Because you do so doesn't make you automatically just a hater. There's something wrong, right? There's something that's bothering you, and it's okay to speak up about that. As far as 2K15, that was a big deal, if you remember correctly, because it was the first next-gen game on PC. So it was a big deal in my house, and what I ended up doing, and my brother loved this because he loved watching it, is I dove right into my team on NBA 2K15 PC, and I played the hell out of that, and it was just a really fun time. And I think NBA 2K15 was a strong release.
It definitely was, and that was very exciting in our community, obviously, that we got the next-gen port, the PS4, Xbox One port. There was a site. I'm not going to mention the site, partly because I forget the name. In fact, a large part because I forget the name. But also, I wouldn't want to give them the publicity anyway. But they were just putting out all these bogus reports about 2K15 PC, that it was going to be that it was going to be prior gen port again, or that it was going to be cancelled. Real clickbait articles at the time. This was 2014 that they were doing that, and yeah, they were just spreading this misinformation for clicks, which is common, obviously, online. But I do remember that it stands out because I was thinking, why are you doing this? You're just going to end up eating crow if you're wrong, and why are you just trying to misdirect people like this? People just want to be relevant, I suppose. But yeah, I do. That stands out in my memory that there was this site trying to misdirect everybody about 2K15 and put out these unconfirmed reports, and yeah, that's just always stuck in my memory.
I remember your video with your mouth wide open, looking with the thumbnail with your mouth wide open, looking at the 2K15 logo and a picture of Kevin Durant with his head down, and you saying, I think caption was NBA 2K15 to be canceled. I remember your video.
It was me. I can come clean. It was me. No, but yeah, I do forget the site, but I wouldn't want to give them publicity anyway because it was It was just ridiculous. And every day, like for a couple of weeks, every day there was this article about 2K15 PC being cancelled and such. And of course that plays on a fear that PC gamers have when it comes to basketball gaming, that we're not going to get a game, because we have seen situations where we either don't get the next-gen port, even as of 2K22, obviously, or the PC releases go away, as Live did in 2002 and again after '08.
And people are worried about that now.
Yeah.
They're worried about either the PC version of NBA 2K being scrapped or it being last gen again for 2K23. So we'll have to talk about that on a future episode as well when we get more news.
And finally, we have Tyler Vickery at TVic86 on Twitter, and he says, I finally got a PS5 before 2K22 and was super pumped, and it hasn't disappointed me. I love the graphics. And this is an interesting one to end on, because obviously it's positive, where a lot of the responses we've had, like us, have been more skeptical, jaded, negative, whatever. But yeah, obviously people are still getting pumped for the games and enjoying them. And while I may not feel that way myself, it is nice to hear that at the same time, because again, that is ultimately what we want to do with games, enjoy them. You know, I am glad to hear that as well.
No, I love that he's enjoying the game, and it hasn't been all bad for my brothers and I with NBA 2K22. It has been for the PC. We just don't really enjoy it at all for that version of it. But for the Xbox Series X version, hell, I mean, we put in hundreds of hours into it now. We finished a full 82-game season on the same team, playing 12-minute quarters, and we're in the playoffs right now, and we're in the second round. So we got our money's worth with 2K22, so it's definitely not all bad. He mentions the graphics. I have no issues with the graphics on NBA 2K22. Do I think that it's the best in the series? Absolutely not. Do I think that it's more than acceptable? Of course it is. The most important thing for me is the gameplay between the lines and how that feels. And, do we have the control that we need to? Is it fun for myself? Is it fun for my brothers? Etc. And that's where it misses the mark sometimes, especially on head-to-head games. It's actually been better for Legends, for the way we like to play in that regard, than many past games. So, no, I love to hear a positive comment in here, and I'm glad that he's enjoying it.
Because it is an awful feeling when you've built up a game in your mind. You've looked at all the previews, you're excited, the trailers look good, the new features, everything sounds good, and you get the game, and it just doesn't live up to the expectations. Can you remember the first game that really disappointed you after a preview season?
NBA Live 07.
NBA Live 07?
Yeah, NBA Live 07 on Xbox 360 is the most disappointing release that I've ever had my hands on. It's what made us switch to 2K. And then I would say, actually, you know what? That's not the most, though. That's not the most I've been disappointed. 2K18 is the most I've been disappointed in my history of playing basketball video games.
Just because of the expectations of 2K17 before it?
Yeah. It was more along the lines of the fact that they promoted 2K18. You remember Ronnie 2K's tweet before it was released? He said, "Get ready for the best 2K ever." The way they were marketing it, it was like, hey, we may be changing things about the motion system, but it's better than ever, and this is why. And there was a lot of stuff in the developer blog that wasn't true about the actual game, right? And we found that out in the preview season of 2K19, where they admitted to some of that stuff in the new developer blogs. So I think 2K18 is the most disappointed I've ever been, but the first time I ever felt true disappointment in a release was Live 07 for Xbox 360.
I remember being greatly disappointed by Live 07 as well for the PC, and then of course we got a patch that kind of fixed some problems, sort of, not really, and that was that. We talk about the amount of patches these days, and that's a problem in and of itself, but back then having to do petitions to get patches and beg for patches, and you maybe get one or two, usually just one, back in the day, and it would fix some things, but usually not really to the point of a broken game not being broken anymore. That was a whole other level of disappointment as well. As far as other games, non-basketball games, WWF Attitude for the Nintendo 64 was a game that it just did not live up to the hype. It's one of those games that if you talk to any wrestling fan of wrestling video games, that's kind of the game that, even if you loved WWF back in the day, as I did, it had its moments, but it just did not live up to the hype. It didn't live up to what AKI THQ were doing with the WCW games at the time, and then of course they got the WWF license, and the games got a lot better than what Acclaim was doing. But that was the first game that I remember being so excited, bringing it home, playing it, and just being like, this is not what I wanted. And going out there, my folks saying, "Oh, you enjoying your new game?" And me going, yeah, it's fun, because you don't want to admit that you've feel like you've just wasted money that you don't have a lot of as a kid, obviously. But yeah, that was the first game that I really felt let down by the previews of.
I'd still say the best wrestling video game. I'm not even into wrestling, but the best wrestling video game that I've ever played was WCW versus NWO World Tour for N64.
Yeah, that's an AKI game. That's them.
Oh my god, that game just had it all. The music, presentation, loved the graphics at the time, the control. Just really enjoyed playing that game.
Yeah, they went from WCW to the WWF license, and that definitely improved the WWF's games immensely. But yeah, again, it's just not a good feeling when you feel like I've wasted my money, and a lot of people do trade games in. Which I have done sometimes, but of course with basketball game, even before I became a hardcore basketball game collector, I never really traded them in, or I traded them in on a platform that I didn't play as much when I double dipped, say some of the PlayStation 2 games, and of course then bought them again years later because I'm crazy like that. But yeah, it's not a good feeling. But to that point, it's great to hear that not everybody is experiencing that with the new games. That we do have people like Tyler who feel that their investment in the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X was well worth it, and that the games haven't disappointed. And that's good to hear. And hopefully they can continue to make strides that less of us feel disappointed year after year.
I really want to get excited for NBA 2K23.
Same.
I really do. Like, people don't understand. Like you think I want a release that I'm disappointed in? I mean, I really want to get excited every year for these games. And there still is some level of excitement. Like, my brother and I we still have this excitement of getting our hands on the game for the first time, going through the rosters to see if any new faces were made, or touched up on, etc., looking to see if there's any new added content. And then there's always that first fun, exciting feeling of getting onto the court and trying to, play the game for the first time and see the differences in gameplay. Unfortunately, gameplay since 2K18 has pretty much disappointed us in a major way every release. So 2K18, 2K19, 2K20, 2K21, 2K22, we have not been thrilled with the way the game feels on the sticks. And I really hope that changes in the future.
I do too, absolutely. But the good thing is we do have options, you and I having such extensive collections. I think more people are doing that these days as well. I've seen some comments on YouTube. Of course, we post the NLC podcast on YouTube every week. People enjoying hearing us talk about these older games, and because they like going back to them themselves if they're not enjoying the latest game. And of course, there's not always news about 2K22 or the latest game coming out every week. So naturally, we're going to talk about any major news if it comes about. But we're quite happy to play these old games and talk about them as well. And clearly, we're not alone on that. We really do appreciate those comments, and it's good to know that we're not alone on that. We're not the crazy old men, Derek. There's a lot of people who are interested in retro basketball gaming more and more, and I think it's because of these issues with microtransactions, with feeling stale, and going back to old favorites. It's not necessarily about saying these are definitely way better than current releases. It's just about what is more fun for you, what is more fun for me, and enjoying that, which, again, is what it's all about. And if that is the latest release, that's awesome. Play what you enjoy, and as we said earlier in the show, on the settings you enjoy, the difficulty you enjoy your time on the virtual hardwood.
Yeah, and lastly, I want to thank everybody for responding to that prompt. We had so many different responses, again, from people that follow me, people that don't follow me, etc. Like, it just showed up on their feed, the question and whatnot. And this is for my D4 Gaming channel, which has a very small follower count, because I just created that channel recently. It has a much smaller follower count in comparison to my main D4 account. And we're just getting all of these great responses and people interacting with the show. So I want to thank all of you.
Indeed, thank you so much for all the responses. We will continue to put out that mailbag prompt each and every week. You can also write into the show, hit us up on our socials, which we will mention shortly, or email us at podcast@nba-live.com. But with that being said, that has brought us to the end of episode number 414 of the NLC podcast. We thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. The podcast comes out every Sunday on the NLSC, which is nba-live.com, of course. You can also tune in on all the major podcatching apps and platforms, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, just to name a few. And of course, if you are subscribed to us on YouTube, which you absolutely should be, we also post the show there. And since it is that time, Derek, what are your socials and any of the final thoughts this week?
No, thank you for, all the answers to the mailbag question, but also for your submissions for the NLSC Top 10 Plays of the Week. Keep them coming. You can reach me at D4384 on Twitter or at D43G. I'm most active on that platform. You can also reach me on the NLSC. I'm D for 3 over there. I'm a team member. And I'm also on YouTube, D for 3.
Once again, I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. We are NLSC Basketball on Instagram. On YouTube, we are NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week, so thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.